Go ahead.
So today we'll be talking about the genetic modification of human embryos, and if it is a tangible step in the future or if it is a step too far for science. So when starting our research, we wanted to know what types of scientific advancements could have a major effect in the near future. So we turned to genetics. We looked at advancements in fertility treatments, such as in vitro fertilization, and we looked at how the finishing of the genotyping of the human genome could affect things in the near future. So eventually, we formed a research question, which is, should the United States government allow the genetic modification of human embryos?
The potential solutions that we researched while researching our question was, first, genetic modification of human embryos should not be allowed. The second being genetic modification of human embryos should be allowed for therapeutic purposes only. Third being genetic modification of human embryos should be allowed for therapeutic purposes only in the future. And fourth being genetic modification as a whole should be allowed. This led us to our proposed solution number 3, that genetic modification of human embryos should be allowed for therapeutic purposes only in the future.
So the first lens that we examined this issue from was the scientific lens. The idea of embryo modification is all possible through the technology known as CRISPR-Cas9. This is a protein and RNA complex that goes into the cell, and since we're using this for gene therapy, there are 2 prominent procedures that can take course. The first procedure is known as nuclear DNA transplant, in which the complex would enter the nucleus and splice the defective DNA and replace it with corrected one. The second one is a little bit more detailed, as shown on the next slide. This was known as mitochondrial replacement therapy. So the father and the mother both contribute their DNA, and this is not only in the nucleus, but also in the mitochondria. However, at times, this DNA can be defective, which brings in need for a donor. What a donor can do is they can replace the unhealthy cytoplasm with a new one, while also removing the genetic material of the donor. This would leave the genetic material of the genetic material of the parents, while removing the genetic material of the donor. So this would keep everything the same, except replace it with healthy mitochondria. So going back to what I was stating previously, there's about a 75% chance that these procedures go as planned. According to Sarah Bristow and Abner Hirschlag in a study they did, there's still a 25% chance that one of these procedures could go unexpected. So we found this to be a potential limitation to our solution. However, when we addressed all the solutions in regards to the scientific lens, we felt like our solution addressed this the best, since it allows more time for these procedures to be perfected or even made closer with a higher success rate. But when looking at the other solutions, such as allowing genetic modification now, we felt like this 25% chance was too high. Not allowing this at all would keep prominent genetic diseases in the gene pool, and allowing this as a whole could lead to some abuse of technology, which will be reviewed in other lenses.
To start off the social lens, I have 2 questions from a Harper Avery magazine, and the first question was, who should decide what genes a child gets? 70% said God, 11% said no one, 16% said parents, and only 3% said doctors. The same people also answered a second question later in the article, which was, if you could enhance your child's genes to give him or her an increase in a resistance to a disease, would you do so? And 75% of those same people said that they, yes, would genetically modify their child in order to give them an increase in a resistance to a disease. This just goes to show that genetic modification overall would not be as widely accepted versus when it is more specifically towards therapeutic purposes. It would definitely be more accepted because it is targeted towards you and yourself, and therefore you would be more willing to say yes to that. Which leads me to my next point, that people with diseases such as Huntington's or early onset Alzheimer's or any genetic disease sometimes are abstain from having children because they do not want to pass on their disease to their child. But with genetic modification of therapeutic purposes, they would then be more inclined to have children because they know that they have that safety blanket of that genetic modification, and their child would not get the disease that they or their family have. If genetic modification did go through as a whole with designer babies, there could be serious negative social implications. The first being that it would give off the perspectives of doctors playing the role of God. And this is because as doctors are picking and choosing the genes that are going to go into a child, from a religious perspective, that is a lot of that is basically what God would do, and that is a job or a role of God, so it would have a lot of religious backlash. Secondly, there is also the social implication of the familial relationships being hurt, because a big emotional bond between a parent and child is formed when a parent does not know what their child is going to look like. This is called, according to philosopher William May, the openness to the unbidden. And with genetic modification, that would take away that openness to the unbidden and most likely make that relationship between parent and child more stolid or just overall not as strong. And the third and final social implication that could also be viewed as an economic implication is the wage gap growing. If genetic modification is not made available to the poor because it is too expensive, it'll be much harder for the poor to jump over that poverty line or meet the expectations that the genetically enhanced wealthiest children will be setting. Which leads us to our next slide, the economic lens.
From the economic standpoint, this is one of the largest implications of our solution, which is why we chose to have genetic modification implemented in the future instead of now. So gene therapy right now, it costs between $500,000 and $1.5 million, which is extremely expensive for one family. Diseases such as spinal muscular atrophy, for gene therapy, it costs, as I said before, up to $1.5 million. But when you compare this cost to the cost of a drug treatment, it is $750,000 for the first year and $375,000 every year after that. So gene therapy, which can be compared to genetic modification, it is similar it's what is in practice right now. It is cheaper and it is expected to get less expensive. This can be shown in the graph on the left, which shows the cost of typing the human genome, which in 2000, when it first started, it was over $100 million per one genome being typed. But after being in practice for many years and the technology improving, as of 2017, it costs less than $1,000. And we can expect the similar type of trend to happen with genetic modification, and that it will become more easily available and cheaper for everyone to take advantage of. From a political standpoint, it can be reasonably argued that there is constitutional protection under the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause, and this is what Dr. Tandis from Columbia Law Review argues. The Due Process Clause states that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the U.S., nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So basically what this is saying, if we were to deny genetic modification, this would be taking away the right to a high quality of life, which is going against the Constitution. And there's also, it can also be argued that you would be taking away parental autonomy rights if you were to deny genetic modification. This can be seen through the Supreme Court case Wisconsin v. Yoder, in which an Amish family decided to pull their child out of the school system after he had graduated 8th grade, because they wanted to give their child a more Amish type of lifestyle, which included learning how to do chores and cooking and practicing the Amish religion. Although the Wisconsin state law had currently enforced that children had to be in school until they were of age 16, the Supreme Court ultimately ruled in favor of the Amish family, saying that it is the parents' right to govern how they want their child to grow up. This can be applied to genetic modification, saying that if we are denying parents the right to genetically modify their child, we are denying them the right to parent their children.
So to sum up our argument and to evaluate the actual practicality of the situation, we can see that our solution addresses this issue in the best way because it allows for disease eradication through gene therapy.